Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Between Sessions with Berries. Today's guest is Dr. Maelisa McCaffrey, a licensed psychologist, educator, and the brains behind QA Prep. She's also the author of Stress-Free Documentation for Mental Health Therapists and a total nail art enthusiast. I want to talk about that. Maelisa brings a fresh and fun approach to a topic most therapists dread, clinical documentation. Through her practical trainings and her YouTube channel, she helps therapists feel less overwhelmed and more confident with their notes without compromising ethics or client care. We're diving into ADHD-friendly systems, common progress note mistakes, and how to stop second-guessing every word that you write. Maelisa, thank you so much for being here. I love that you're a guest today. Before we hit record, I was telling Maelisa, I was like, I've watched your YouTube channel. I've been on your newsletter for years. She has the best content about documentation. It's fantastic. So Maelisa, thank you for being here. And I would love to just kind of dive in and start with your journey from, just being a regular clinician to then turning into this amazing coach that helps other clinicians with documentation. Maybe you could walk us through the journey and share a little bit about that in QA Prep.
Yeah. I mean, we'll stick with the brief version because it's been a while now. Gosh, I started QA Prep back in 2014.
Wow.
And that was really because I got burnt out initially from client care. And so I was working in quality assurance at agencies and kind of moving up the ladder there a little bit. And it was so obvious doing trainings with other clinicians. And I worked at a very large agency, so I trained hundreds of therapists. And the most common thing I heard was, thank you so much. I never got any training in this before, or I've never got training in this in grad school. And I heard that from people who were interns all the way up to, people who had been licensed for decades, right? And so I recognized this need and I thought, I wonder if my friends in private practice would want this same kind of training, because people in this agency loved that it was a 2-day training they got at this agency.
Oh my God.
Which is pretty unusual. And as I started talking to people, they were like, yes, absolutely, 100%. And my first thought was like, I'll do a grad school course, right? Because I was thinking, everybody says we didn't learn this in grad school. So I put together a whole syllabus and had this whole thing. And I was thinking like, okay, I'm going to start pitching this to grad schools. And thankfully, Miranda from Zinni-Me, actually, I did what I didn't know at the time is like a typical, discovery call, coaching call with her. And she was like, don't give this to grad schools. She was like, people will pay you for this. And this is something that like people need, and people in private practice need, like people outside of school need this. And this is something you could actually have a business around. And so I had never even considered having a business or being an entrepreneur or anything related to that. So that was very impactful for me. And I went through their boot camp, started a business, learned about all of that stuff, and then found that I really enjoyed it, actually, like really, really loved the marketing, YouTube, even blogging. Kelly made me blog. I always say that. She was like, you have to blog. I was like, I don't want to blog, Kelly. She was like, no, you have to blog. And I mean, back in 2014, like I have great SEO because I've been blogging since 2014, right? So, but all of that to say, like I found that I really enjoyed it, and I just continued, and still to this day, continue to get the feedback of, I never learned this in grad school. I feel so lost. I feel like I should know this already. And this is so helpful to have someone actually talking about like these very practical issues. And I call notes the dishes and laundry of our clinical work. They're one of the only things that you can't outsource, right? Using AI to write your notes is the most you can outsource them. But I mean, other things you could have people completely do for you. And I mean, literally the only thing you cannot outsource that you have to actually check up on. And every time you do a session, you have another note to do.
Yes.
So it consistently piles up.
They're the bane of your existence. They're always there. So why do you think that clinicians do struggle with the documentation piece so much? Like, why is it so stressful for therapists? Maybe we could just talk about that for a second. I mean, I think anybody listening is probably like, duh, but just like, what do you think is like the underlying anxiety for most therapists around this topic?
Yeah, I really think it's a few things, but It is the lack of clarity around guidelines.
Yes.
All of our ethics guidelines, when I do trainings, I go through all of the ethics guidelines from all the different associations. And essentially they say, write notes. And it's like, that's the only advice we get, or the only actual guidepost we have. We know we have to do notes. We don't know what has to be in them. And then when we look for resources, a lot of them are really based on a medical model and writing SOAP notes, and don't actually apply to someone who's a therapist who's seeing a client every single week consistently. That's very different from like a psychiatrist who's seeing someone every other month, and the type of notes that they need to write. And a lot of the advice we have is based on that more traditional model. Yeah. I think also like the way in which we practice, and this is why our guidelines are purposely vague, it's so different. So even in a private practice setting, the types of treatment people are doing, the types of clients you have. Are you working with kids? Are you working with couples? Are you working with adults? Are you working with college students? Are you doing group therapy? Are you doing EMDR? Are you doing IFS, right? Or are you not doing any of those? All of that is so varied that I always tell people, like, my answer to every question you will ever ask me is it depends, because it depends on the scenario, right? And who you see and how you work and what's important for you as the clinician. And so all of that, we have a ton of flexibility around writing notes, and that flexibility and that lack of clarity is also very anxiety provoking. The type of person who becomes a therapist wants to do things the right way. And they typically want to do it well, right? And like, if you're listening to this podcast, it's because you care, right? So if you're a random clinician, a rare clinician who doesn't care about any of this stuff, you're not listening to this podcast. So inherent to you listening to my voice right now is that you are conscientious about this process. Yeah. And so that means you want some guidelines and you want some help and you want to know you're doing it the right way. And then lastly, you can't get that because you can't share your notes with anybody.
Yes. Right.
So you can't get that confirmation once you're outside of a training environment, right?
Yeah.
And so all of those things combined make it a very, very anxiety-provoking, vague process that's very difficult to know if you're actually doing well.
I mean, even with like the different insurance companies, sometimes they'll give you like on their website, if you dig deep enough, you'll be able to find some sort of clinical documentation guideline for the progress note. But then you look at another insurance company, it's a totally different guideline. So it's like also that you just see all these different suggestions everywhere. So that's why I love something you do talk about. And you've got sort of like a stress-free documentation philosophy that you help people walk through. So maybe we could just talk about that. Like, what is the stress-free documentation philosophy, and how do we just like start to implement that into our practices so we're not having to worry about all this outside noise? Because even on Facebook groups, right, you're like, somebody will say, oh, you have to have this, or you're not allowed to have check boxes. Like the misinformation is just unbelievable. So maybe you could just like start with the stress-free documentation philosophy. Like, how do we get into that?
Yeah, I think like two things that we can kind of dig into, but I'll say these two points so I don't forget, right? Are like, number one, what's your source for that? Is always an appropriate question to ask everybody about everything, including a supervisor.
Love that.
And then number two, like, what is helpful for you? So kind of using those two principles to look at all of this different advice. And there are other documentation experts out there. There aren't hundreds of us, but there's a few of us. And we all say things slightly differently, right? So people will tell me, like, I've taken these other people's trainings too. And really what matters is, number one, what is helpful for you as the clinician? What is helpful? What is useful? And that rule applies to so many things. So if you bill to insurance, if you're contracted with insurance companies, it might be useful for you to include, or it is necessary actually, for you to include the start and stop times in your session. If you're a private practice, you don't give super bills, you're not worried about insurance, you don't need to write the exact start and stop time of the session. It's not useful. It serves no purpose, right? So thinking about like, is this useful for me? Whether that's because it's a mandate, a requirement that I can specifically point to, or just because I find it useful. So I have things in my notes, like in my templates, that I give to people. And then sometimes I'll do an individual consultation and someone will tell me, well, I really like for example, something I don't necessarily have in my templates, but I've heard from a few people that they really like doing is like some sort of check-in, check-out. So not all therapists do this, but quite a few do. They do some type of check-in at the beginning and check out at the end of the session, where they literally like either write it down with the client or they just verbalize that language. And so for a lot of therapists, they say it's actually really helpful for me to write that down.
No, nice.
Well, that's not in my template, but if that's something that's inherent to the work you're doing consistently with almost all of your clients, then yeah, put that in your note,
Yeah.
That's not a requirement, but if it's helpful for you, do it. So I think, thinking through like, what do I actually find useful? That also helps with knowing what not to spend time on. So a lot of people will tell me, one thing I tell people all the time, you probably don't need to write a full mental status exam in every single note, because are you actually checking like the content of their speech and the insight and judgment? Are those things that you kind of inherently know with this middle-aged person who's seeing you for anxiety, right? And that you see every week? No, you're probably focused on mood, affect, behavior.
Yeah.
Those are things that pretty much across the board, most therapists, even weekly, are paying attention to for their therapists. Right. So thinking through like what's useful, because the things that aren't useful, maybe you could throw them out and just not even do it. And then related to that is then I'll hear people say, but I've been told I have to put that piece of information.
Exactly.
In
That's
there.
where my brain just went. It's like, yeah, but aren't we supposed to always have,
we supposed to? And
right.
And then I always say like, what is your source? And I stole this from a guy who's a licensed counselor and an attorney here in Washington State, Eric Strom.
Yes.
He also does great trainings. And that's what he says. He's like, what's your source? Because oftentimes when you dig into, there's so many myths we have as a field that we just assume are true.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what was your source? Was your source a supervisor at an agency? Because guess what? I was a QA person at agencies that used to tell supervisors what to do. And oftentimes they didn't know why I was telling them that. And I was telling them that because we got a bad score on an audit. And so we made a new rule to just make it easier for us to train people. But it doesn't mean that like Medicare said we had to do this or Medi-Cal said we had to do this. So, which is Medicaid in California.
Yeah.
So, thinking about what's your source when other people are telling you what you need to put in something and then what's useful for you and letting yourself remove things that aren't and include extra things that are.
I love that. And it's such a therapist-y answer too, right? It's kind of like meet the client where they're at. Like that's what we do already in our work. So like, why aren't we doing that with ourselves, with our documentation? Like if this flow is, if I've got like a 27-page template that the agency gave me like 10 years ago and I hate it, why am I still doing it that way? Yeah. I love that advice. So smart. Okay. So you've got templates, I know, that probably meet all the requirements. So how does a clinician decide, like, I can throw out like half of this crap that I don't want to do and keep the rest of it? Like, how do you decide that? Is it like a consult with you? Is it your template? Is it like, is there something out there that's a trusted source that you would recommend people go to find that information? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so I do have a book, Stress-Free Documentation for Mental Health Therapists. I did that on purpose to make it really accessible financially and just very easily accessible for anybody to access, right? That literally walks you through what goes in a progress note and gives you templates. So there's that. I also, frankly, have free YouTube videos that go through the same information. And so if you want to dig through my YouTube channel, you can find that information. And there's also a part of, yes, like I'm never going to tell anybody, don't get my book, right? But you could do that endlessly. And I work with people who do that. They attend every training I do. They attend every training these other documentation experts do. They collect all the templates. They go on Etsy. They go on Pinterest and they're getting all the templates. And at some point you have to call it. And so, once you know what goes in a note, which often you can actually find the more general criteria if you are worried about insurance, which is, I think, more relevant for if you literally want to check off, I've included certain things. Type in, the insurance company name and behavioral health medical necessity criteria. And often you will actually find something that walks you through specific components they want in a note. Sweet.
Yeah.
Put your note, like create your note template to literally have those headlines, like those subject headings. And then you don't need to include anything else unless it's specifically useful for you.
Yeah.
And if you work with, if you are one of the rare therapists who like doesn't even give super bills, you literally are purely private pay, don't worry about insurance at all. Awesome. Then
The
just,
dream.
find my YouTube video about what goes in a progress note and just do the bare minimum there. or just do a narrative summary. Right? So when I did that, that's what I did. I just wrote a summary of what happened in the session in bullet points, and then what my recommendations were. And that was it, because that's the point, is just documenting what happened.
I love that. Yes. So you touched on like the mental status exam, for example. Like you probably don't need to do all of that information. Are there other like myths out there that you hear all the time? Like somebody comes to you and says, I know for sure we're not allowed to do check boxes. Somebody told me that. Like, do you have like a couple of people that always come and say the same thing, this huge myths that you could like debunk for people?
Yeah. So the check boxes one is one of them.
Okay.
Also, that insurance only pays for CBT. So we'll debunk both of those right now. So insurance, number one, insurance doesn't care about check boxes. Insurance cares about individualized interventions. So how I do teach to use check boxes, because ironically, my goal is that if you really struggle with writing notes, so this doesn't apply to everybody, right? If writing notes is easy for you, great, keep doing what you're doing. But if you struggle with writing notes, my goal is that you write as little as possible in every note, so that most of it is pre-set up for you, pre-written for you.
Love that.
I even teach this when I talk to people about using AI, like how to give the AI prompts, like tell it exactly what you want. Include this information, include this statement, fill in the blank here, right? You can get that detailed with AI, so do it. But, it's okay to have check boxes, because as long as they're individualized. When we hear that myth, insurance doesn't like check boxes, I would say, as a former QA person, right, nobody likes check boxes when they don't give you information. So if you look at the check boxes that are commonly in an electronic health records preset template, for example, it's going to say cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness, ACT, and it's going to EMDR. Like, those are not interventions.
Yeah.
Those are classes. Those are modalities. Those are trainings. Those are full methods, right? They are not individual interventions. So no, don't use those. But, having something pre-written, I'll often teach people, and I think this actually translates really well into AI, to almost use check boxes as sentence starters, or like fill in the blank. Think of them as fill in the blank. So, used cognitive reframing about, explored emotions around, right? So literally you're just filling in the blank and writing very little, but like those interventions are completely different from just checking off a box that says mindfulness or CBT, right?
Yeah.
The other thing is, think about the end user. So often therapists will tell me, well, like, is insurance going to approve this template? Insurance doesn't know what the heck your template is. Nobody sees your note before it's done.
Right.
So print out your note and see what it looks like at the end. Most electronic health records will just list those checkboxes as bullet points.
Oh, yes.
And so nobody knows you have checkboxes. They
so
just
smart.
see the final product, right? And it's not wrong to have checkboxes as long as they're individualized. But if that makes you feel better, it is also not wrong to have bullet points. And I will tell you, as a former auditor, it is so much easier to read. Bullet points.
It's probably a lot better on the auditor.
Any auditor wants it to be very easy to find the information. They don't want to read your whole note.
Yeah.
They don't care about the entire history of the client. They don't want to read through sentences, full paragraphs. I promise you. They want to boom, 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 see exactly what it is they're looking for, which is the client making progress in therapy? And do they still need therapy? That's it. Those are the two things auditors are looking for in individual progress notes. So there's that. Then let's quickly debunk the cognitive behavioral therapy myth. Insurance doesn't care about CBT necessarily. Insurance just wants to see that you are using your master's degree or doctorate degree to do a service as a professional. They want to see that you are doing more. I like to call it the grandma rule. They just want to see that you're doing more than someone's grandmother could do.
I love that.
My grandmother can provide empathy. My grandmother can actively listen to me. My grandmother could provide a safe space for me, right? And I'm not saying like everybody does this. I'm also not saying that those are not things therapists shouldn't be doing. Obviously, those are foundational, inherent to therapy and to any good interpersonal relationship. Right. Those are not things that everyone has to go to graduate school to learn how to do.
Right.
And so think about what are the interventions you actually had to learn how to do and in your education. And those are the things that insurance wants to see in your progress note.
Amazing. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I love that. The grandma role. That is great. So with all that being said, and you've probably done thousands of consults and audits on people's notes, I'm guessing, is there like a couple of things like you always see these in the notes that's like a huge mistake maybe on the progress note or a treatment plan that people, do over and over again? Do you ever see that? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so frankly, the most common one is not doing them.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the most common, and I mean, this is why I literally have a paperwork catch-up group that I run for people who are behind in paperwork, because it was that much of an issue that I consistently was helping people with over and over, literally doing the same individual consultation with like multiple people every single week, helping them catch up on notes. And I was like, I just need to do a group.
Yeah.
Because this is crazy. And everyone thought they were the only therapist who was experiencing this.
Yes.
And even now people will tell me, I know I've heard you say this. And I still thought maybe I was going to show up to this group and it was just going to be you and me and nobody else was going to be in the group.
That's
right?
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so honestly, it is seriously, and if you're a supervisor, it is not a matter of if, it's a matter of when you have a clinician who is behind in their notes. It is that common. And so just knowing that that is the most common thing. And that's why so many of my strategies are around making documentation stress-free, simplified, quick and easy, efficient. And that's why I think that honestly, you and I were some of the first therapists to openly talk about AI and be like, talk about it in a positive way. I mean, I think you and I have both been doing this for a few years now.
Yep.
And it's caught on, especially the last year, I feel like has been big in our field. But when you and I first started talking about it, people were not as open to it, right?
Exactly.
Not in our field anyways. And I was so open to it, I think, because I was working with so many people who just can't get their notes done.
Yeah.
And so I think my particular audience of therapists was a lot more open to AI than other audiences because they're struggling and they're seeking my help because they're struggling just to get them done. Right.
Yeah.
And like quality is important too, but often they're like, I can't even get this done. So any tool that can be helpful and get the notes done. And it's the same with treatment plans, right? Like people just aren't doing them. And I would say it's typically, either end of the spectrum. So it's like biggest mistakes are people simply not doing notes, not doing treatment plans, which they actively know that they need to be doing. And it's typically very stressful to be in that place and very overwhelming to feel like you're digging yourself out of that hole, right?
Yes.
Then the other side is writing way too much, overcomplicating treatment plans, writing tons of treatment goals and objectives and all these individualized interventions throughout each one, and having this huge long thing, doing really long progress notes that are incorporating every piece of feedback from a supervisor, every training you've ever attended, right?
Oh my gosh.
And having I'll see that. And then that also, and ironically, that often leads to then people not doing their documentation because
it's like, there's no way I could keep this up.
It's just so overwhelming. So, it really is that simple that I think the biggest mistakes are just not doing it because and often I would say, whether or not you're the person who then creates the huge list and long template, it's around feeling like I have to do it perfectly. If I can't do it right, then I can't do this note. And so my mantra in our catch-up group is any note is better than no note. So if there's any mistake, it's thinking I can't write this note or I can't finalize this note because it's not good enough. And I promise you, it's I'm 99% sure without even looking at you right now and talking to you and seeing your notes that it's good enough.
Yeah.
And if it's not, you can fix it. And guess what? It's better to have that crappy note, that C+ note, than to have no note at all. So remembering that mantra, any note is better than no note, and just getting something done in a mediocre way rather than trying to make it really great.
Yes. Yep. I love that. And part of what you do, you have ADHD. You've developed systems to help you get stuff done, and you've transferred that over to the lessons and learning that you're giving people. So do you feel like you pretty much, especially somebody with ADHD or a perfectionist or something, are you really getting into like recommending AI pretty much to help with that? And then maybe these co-working kind of groups to like normalize it and then just like make you set time to do it? Is that sort of your strategies around it right now? Or what strategies do you have for people that are like, I am so ADD. I sit down and it's like a squirrel and I do everything but what I have to do.
Yeah. So it kind of like you said earlier, it kind of meet the client where they're at, right? It depends where they are. So
true.
For people who are really behind in their notes, I do recommend the group because oftentimes they can't even move past it. They can't even start today's notes without that overwhelming shame and sense of like, I don't even know where to start. Yeah. And so once we all know this, right? Like once you can work through that shame, then you can solve the problem. But it's very difficult to solve the problem without first working through the shame. So for someone who's really behind in notes, I recommend they start there, right? I'm like, before I even give you any strategies, like, let's just get into this. But for a lot of other people, I will often recommend AI. What I find is helpful for people with ADHD specifically is that AI gets the notes started. Okay. So many people tell me like it's so much easier to go in and edit a note than it is to, even with the templates, I try to create that with my templates as best I can, right? I would say like my templates are as close to AI without AI as you're going to get.
Love it.
Because I'm trying to like literally write things ahead of time for you, right? But AI is starting the note for you. And so that initiation of task is so difficult for many of us with ADHD. And it really solves that problem. So for a lot of people where they say that's the difficulty, I will recommend like you might want to consider trying AI. And, often the barrier there for people is, I would say most people when I work with them, they're open to it because they're struggling with their notes already. And they're just concerned about what their clients are going to think. And so I haven't listened to all the episodes of this podcast. I don't know if you've already talked about it, but most clients are very open to it.
Yeah, so, that's been my experience. Everybody's like, I don't care. Whatever makes your life easier is fine with me, is kind of the attitude I get. Yeah.
Exactly. And even if 8 of 10 clients say yes, well, great. Like that's 8 notes that are going to be started and much more easier for you to do. And then you only have to spend that mental energy on 2 of them.
Yes.
Right? Because for a lot of therapists, it's not just the time. Yes, you have to plan out the time. Like if you don't have time in your schedule to get notes done, they won't get done. That's a simple fact. But I find it's a lot more than time management for people. And especially even for people with ADHD and people who are working with people with ADHD will assume it's a time management issue.
Right.
But oftentimes it's an energy management issue. And so if you don't have that feeling of overwhelm, when you sit down and use AI to do the note for you, and instead you're just like, oh, wow. And you have that feeling of like, oh my gosh, look at what the AI picked up on. Like, I didn't know I did that.
I love it that happens. And it's like, I did that.
Yeah, exactly. And so that is a completely different feeling while writing the note. And it might take you the exact same amount of time. Yeah. But you don't feel exhausted and wiped out, and you're not avoiding the task. And that can make all the difference.
Yeah. And one thing that really does come up a lot in this podcast when we're talking about AI note takers is the relief people feel when they realize they can be way more present in their session and they're not having to think through like, okay, what am I going to write from the mental status? What am I going to, what are my intervention using right now? What was that on the treatment plan? They don't have to think about it as much, and they can just be so present with the client that it's such a relief. And it kind of takes that burden off. It reduces the burnout too, is kind of what we hear over and over again. Yeah.
Yeah. And can I say something kind of on the flip side
too? Yes, please.
One thing that I have, frankly, like I spent so many years trying to convince everyone, like, get online. And then COVID happened and they all finally did it, right? But the past couple of years, I've actually encouraged certain people to flip back to paper.
Oh,
so
interesting.
I want to acknowledge that, like, if paper is easy for you, And if you're the therapist who because I will work with therapists who are like, I still just write things down to myself.
Yeah.
Well, if you can like print out a note template.
Yeah.
And literally do your note by hand. You know what? For a lot of people, if you have a good template, like the template, honestly, like the template I have, if you print that out and do it by hand, you could do that thing in 2 minutes.
That's
and
amazing.
So it's going to take a little bit longer electronically, and you're going to have to format it and set it up and everything. But for a lot of people, frankly, just printing out your notes and doing them by hand, if you're using a lot of check boxes and circles and things like that, is so much faster. And so if that's what naturally works for you, do it. You know, do what feels good and what gets the notes done.
That's amazing. And now in the EHRs, you can just take a picture of the note and upload these, and you've got an EHR. You don't have to go through all that, like, you know, how am I then going to get it in here to keep the documentation all in one place? Like that whole complicated piece of it. Exactly. I love that. Yeah. Amazing. And also, you know, I've seen a lot of people, and you've probably seen this too, people using like tablets that kind of translate it into text, and then you can upload, like even with Barry's and the other AIs, you can literally just put text in there and that'll turn it into a progress note for you. And you don't even have to worry about a format as much. So, you know, there's so many ways to do it now to make it easier with AI and technology and templates like you have, you know, taking your template and then being able to just fill it in and upload a picture of it would be amazing for a lot of people. Because I know a lot of people like that tactile, like I like to write while I'm in session or right after to process it myself.
Yeah. And it's really about what strategy works for you,
Yes.
right? Like there's no wrong strategy. You just described so many different ways to do it, all the way from writing to like being in the record and, you know, and whether that's dictating the note afterwards, writing a little summary, or having the AI listen in on your session and kind of initiate that for you. All of those, you know, there are other talks that you can learn about the ethics of all of that. But as long as like you have client consent, you're using HIPAA compliant systems, then all of those work. And it really, there's no wrong answer as long as it works for you and gets the things done.
I love that. And that's a myth, I think, with AI documentation, too. It's like they think that they've got to have it recording in the background the whole time, but you really don't. You can dictate at the end. You can upload text like we talked about. There's lots of ways. There's even Barry's is just coming out with this, a way to upload an audio file, your own audio file to Barry's if you want. Just have it like voice dictate and upload it if that's easier for you. So there's so many different systems. And I love how you're just talking about individualizing it for the person.
I used to hate dictation. And I realized what I actually didn't like was transcription. Yes. And so I've had to switch my understanding of that with AI now, that I actually really like dictation because you can talk. I naturally write a little bit more formally and a little bit better, more professionally than I talk. When I talk, it's very conversational, even if I'm doing a workshop, right? Which works for making this information very friendly and accessible.
Yeah.
But when I'm writing something I don't always want to do, but I've actually found that AI is great because I can talk that way, but then AI will turn it into more professional speak, and it's not transcribing exactly what I say. I'm able to then say, oh, don't include that sentence, or switch that, or focus on this, or add more detail about that. You can give it directives as well. And so just as a little plug for anybody who maybe in the past tried different dictation software, using AI for dictation is very different.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's amazing. So other than like note takers, do you use any other AI in your life? Because we love to kind of do a little bit of a segment on this just to see like other ways therapists are using AI in their lives to make their businesses run easier, just their lives in general. Do you have any other little tips like that?
Yeah. So my go-to is I do a lot of workshops and trainings. I hate creating quiz questions. AI is perfect for creating quiz questions. I have learned, you know, as with everything, like I have it create 20 questions in order to get 10 good ones. And I have to I've had to learn to be a lot more directive, you know, in telling it, because it frequently will give me like multiple correct answers. And so it's not perfect, you know, but I use AI for that. I use AI to get ideas about like YouTube thumbnails.
Oh, so I love that.
Sometimes those come very naturally to me and it feels really easy to create. And if I'm stuck, it's nice to have something like AI to be like, hey, I'm doing a YouTube video on this topic. It's for this audience. What are some ideas? You know, give me 5 different ideas for a YouTube thumbnail. And so even without it generating the actual image for me, it can give me a good place to start. So I have found that to be really useful. And I use that a lot.
I love it. You have great thumbnails, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
I love them. They're always really good. Thank you for sharing that. So how do people find you? How do they work with you? Where are you in all the places?
Yeah. So qaprep.com is where to go to find all the things. You can get the book there, stress-free documentation. That is also available on Amazon, on bookshop.org if you don't like Amazon. So you can support a local bookshop that way. But yeah, I would say those are the two big things. And if you're just looking for like some quick help and don't know where to start with the book. It's very accessible. You get a ton of resources there, and it's a beautiful book. I'm very proud of it and put a ton of work into making it look nice too. Yeah. So I wanted it to be something that you could feel good referencing, literally have it as a reference. But yeah, qaprep.com, you can check out. I also have courses in the catch-up group.
Oh, nice.
If you are looking, you can get on the wait list for whenever the next catch-up group opens up.
That's amazing. How often do you have those? Are they like a monthly thing or
We
quarterly?
do that as like a semester schedule.
Oh, okay.
So
nice.
yeah, so the next one will be, I think enrollment will open either like around January is usually,
nice.
January and August is usually when we open enrollment.
That's so cool. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here today. I'm sure people are going to love this topic, and it's going to be so helpful to just hear the stress-free way to do the documentation, because I know it is just like, I mean, it's every clinician's, the bane of our existence is having to keep up with documentation. So I'm glad you're out there and helping everybody get through this with all of your resources.